How's it going out there, YouTube? My name is Jesse, and I am back for another comic book video. And since we are in the month of November, these are heroes that you thought you knew. So for this video, I am actually going to be covering 3 names of heroes that you think you know. 2 from Marvel and 1 from DC. Now, the interesting one I found from one of these characters is there are actually 6 individuals with the name for one of these, and the other 2 only had 1 apiece. One of the ones that we're going to be doing is Wonder Man. There were 6 people with the name of Wonder Man. Of course, one was from 1918. I'm not even sure if that was a comic book, because I don't know if comic books were out that early. And 2 of them are from other countries, so we won't be covering them. But there are 3 of them from the Golden Age and from the US that we will go ahead and cover for this video. And that's going to be Wonder Man, as I said. The other 2 are the Red Bee and the Black Panther. That's right, they were heroes with those names before. So Wonder Man and Black Panther is obviously Marvel, and Red Bee is DC. So let's get into covering the heroes that you thought you knew. Okay, so I misspoke on my intro. There were 8 Wonder Man that came before the Wonder Man in Marvel Comics. 1 from the UK, 1 from France, 1 from Australia. There's 1 that's known as Waldo Wonder Man, whatever that's for. That's the one that appeared in 1918. And there is a Wonder Man who is an advertising, a corporate sponsor or something like that. He gets his superhero power from eating Wall's ice cream, whatever that's for. But we are going to be talking about the 3 Wonder Men from the Golden Age comics. Wonder Man, Fred Carson, had his first and only appearance in Wonder Comics #1 in 1939. The original publisher was Fox Features and created by Will Eisner. Fred Carson was a radio engineer who enjoyed traveling the world. While he was on a trip to Tibet, he met a yogi. Now, for those who are wondering, a yogi is someone who excels at yoga. And the kinds that were in Tibet were said that they had some sort of connection to a spiritual plane, and they had some sort of spiritual powers. The yogi put Fred through a series of tests, and Fred proved that he had physical and moral strength to do good. As a reward, the yogi gave him a magical ring, which Fred used to fight for humanity, known as Wonder Man. When wearing the magical ring, Wonder Man would have the power of super strength, the ability to leap 100 yards at a time, and had a resistance to bullets and explosion. A lawsuit would be brought against Wonder Comics, Fox publication, claiming that Fox had stolen their idea of Superman because the DC Comics, who was National Publications at the time, who would be represented as Detective Comics Incorporated in court, was in the same building as Fox. Now, Will Eisner did claim that he was told to make a virtual copy of Superman for Wonder Man, but in court, Eisner testified that he was asked to copy Superman, but that he actually based Wonder Man on the Phantom, who was created before either of Wonder Man or Superman. Will Eisner also said that the Wonder Man comics actually hit the newsstands before the first issue of Action Comics did. regardless of this, the courts ruled in favor of DC and made them stop publishing Wonder Man. Wonder Comics would then be renamed, with issue number 3 being called Wonder World Comics, where Will Eisner would introduce his creation of the Flame. The second Wonder Man on this list was the first one to be produced by Nador Comics. Wonder Man, Mystico, was first appeared in Startling Comics number 1 in 1940. As I said, the publisher was Nador, and the creator was Leonard Sandstone. Mystico was an ancient Egyptian seer, which died 3,000 or so years ago. I don't think when he died was as important as being brought back. His mummy, was taken out of a museum by a mad scientist in attempts to resurrect him. I have no idea why. I don't own the comic, so I don't have any information on why. I'm guessing maybe he thought he could use him in some ways. Now, the mad scientist used fighter rays to revive him, but the machine was turned up too high, and the result of that, the machine explodes, destroying the lab and the mad scientist. The process did revive Mystico, and at the decade of which he was revived, he decided that he would fight evil. He built up a good relationship with U.S. military officials and had his fair share of enemies, one of them including to be the Dark Sorceress Zarbu. As a magician, he had many different powers. He had warning premonitions, because he was a seer. He had the power of levitation, but could not levitate himself. He had the power of summoning any plot-convenient related device. I love that. His power was not all-powerful. He did have some range. He did have some limits. His powers would only be in a certain limited range, shorter than line of sight, as it says, and I'm guessing that would be within maybe 20 to 30 feet. There's nothing specified about that. His powers could not affect prehistoric creatures, and he could not fly. Even without his powers, he was a very adept fighter and had a lot of knowledge on the occult. He would also appear on the first issue of the Fighting Yank comic, but I don't believe he was part of the story. He would also appear in a number of issues of Startling Comics. When Nador Comics would be renewed by a company called Public Library, who would eventually be bought by Fawcett Comics, when Fawcett would eventually go out of business. And if you'd like to know more about Fawcett Comics, I actually did a video about Fawcett, which is interesting, in the lawsuit that brought them down. When Fawcett went out of business, they sold the brand of Popular Library stories to Warner Brothers. Some people have used this person in some of their stories, but Warner Brothers hasn't filed any actions against them. But it is a use at your own risk character, which means, I guess, if they want to, they could probably bring up legal action, but it's not important enough to them to do so. The third Wonder Man, who would be the second from the Nador Comics, would be Wonder Man Brad Spencer. First appeared in Complete Book of Comics and Funnies number 1 in 1944. His publisher was, of course, Nador. Now, the person who created him is actually unknown, so there's nobody credited for him. Let's see. Brad Spencer is accidentally exposed to voltage of a secret current. I don't even know what to make of that. He got zapped by some secret powers. It did give him superpowers, and he decided to become a crime fighter, a crime fighting vigilante, and he is helped out by his girlfriend Carol Page. That sounds like a very basic name. Okay. Let's see. His power is he has the ability to become invulnerable, also as hard as steel, and has super strength. He works from his Wonder Lab, and he created the world's most powerful telescope. From one of his enemies, he confiscates a vacuum spiral device, which allows him to cross vast and great distances, such as if he was so inclined, he could make it to the sun in a matter of minutes. A couple of his enemies would include Lilith, Dr. Voodoo, and someone called the Immortal Emperor. Now, he had the only appearance in the title Complete Book of Comics and Funnies #1. That was the only one of that title that he appeared in. He appeared in a number of issues of Mystery Comics and Wonder Comics. He was also owned by Popular Library, which was owned by Fawcett, which is now owned by Warner Brothers. He is also known as a use-at-your-own-risk character. Warner Brothers also owns DC, so I don't know if they are part of the DC universe or not. But those are the 3 Wonder Man of which we are covering. The Red Bee, Richard Raleigh, I think I'm pronouncing the name right, I probably just butchered that, first appeared in Hit Comics #1 in 1940. He was created by Tony Blum and Charles Nichols. Red Bee was produced by, the Hit Comics was produced by Quality Comics, and Hit Comics would be the only title that the Red Bee would appear in. The Red Bee is a district attorney who for the Superior City in Oregon, was tired of seeing criminals get off on technicalities and decided to become a costume crime fighter so he could bring these people to justice. While being the Red Bee, he still worked for the district attorney in his civilian identity, and he would get the scoop on some of the latest criminals that were being investigated or let off, and this allowed him to be able to go after the criminals, and he would take on a number of Nazi villains. He had the ability to control bees, and he was an experienced fighter. I mean, he had trained bees. One of the bees that he worked with was his favorite bee and could sting without dying. So this bee he worked with a lot because it could keep stinging the villain over and over and over again. He had a stinger gun, which I'm assuming that it would hit criminals just like a bee sting. And he also had something called Auto Gainer, and this was a device that would propel him in the air and help him scale buildings with more ease. Now, he was never much of a popular character, and he would be moved to the DC universe after they acquired Quality Comics. He would appear in the pages of All-Star Squadron, and it was explained that he was killed by Nazis while trying to save Golden Age heroes such as Our Man and some of the other members of the All-Star Squadron. The squadron would form a group called the Freedom Fighters, and the Red Bee would be made an honorary member of them. Plastic Man would also mention once that Richard was actually a drinking buddy of his. Lastly on this list, we will go over the Black Panther. The Black Panther, real name unknown, had his first and only appearance in Stars and Stripes number 3 in 1941. He was published by Centaur Comics and created by Paul Gustafson. I believe I've mentioned this creator before. Apparently, the Black Panther was a mysterious man who had quite a reputation and was feared by his foes just by the sight of him. A evil foreign agent, as they said this, Eric Rogarts, and his minion Argo kidnapped someone named Professor Taff, who had developed a formula that can petrify any living object and then unpetrify them using an antidote. The Black Panther saw them and tracked them to their hidden hideout and had a fight with them. Argo would apparently die when he would land on top of Rogarts and be injected by an imperfect version of the petrifying formula. The Black Panther was able to stop Rogarts before he could steal the formula completely. While the Panther was trying to stop and subdue him, Rogarts would fall off the side of a cliff that was adjacent to his lair, which was behind a wall of hidden rock, and he fell into a raging whirlpool. It is assumed that that is what ended his life. He has no superpowers to speak of, but much like a number of heroes that appeared in the Golden Age, he is a skilled fighter. He uses both his fists and a knife that he is extremely proficient in, and he was also extremely agile. I seem to be covering Will Eisner an awful lot when I do these Golden Age reviews. I guess that this shows that DC just does not play very nice with others. I hope you learned something in this video. If you already knew who these characters were, hey. If you didn't know who these characters were, there you go. I got more people on the way, more names that were someone else before they are who you know. So, until next time, I'll be seeing you.